on Thursday, working group conveners meeting. CCC 2, Thursday lunchtime. And the New Scholars Workshop 2 is also scheduled for tomorrow. You meet at the same place you met today, CCC 3. And as we arranged today, you will have your lunch there as well. Anybody here interested in a certificate of participation? Some people ask for that sometimes. Should submit their names to the registration desk by 2 p.m. tomorrow, Thursday. Okay, that's the latest time so that we can get it printed in time for you all by Friday at the closing ceremony. So please, if you require a certificate of participation, kindly submit your name at the registration desk before 4 p.m. on Thursday. I just moved it up 2 hours. That's what I've written here, before 4 p.m. on Thursday. Right, so those are the announcements I have. So I'll call Dr. Hago. Hago, where are you? This is very impromptu, but we are performers, right? And we are used to improvising. So he's going to teach us a song. Right. Thank you. Thank you so much. You're all so gracious. Thank you.
Try 2. Nice. Okay, let me descend to this level. It feels better like this. Okay, so you remember yesterday we had a palm wine group over here to give us some lively song. And one of the dances we performed was Kpan Logo. Yes, so we will learn about 2 or 3 songs, depending on how fast we get a text, the rhythm and everything. We might learn more if we still have time. Okay? So first things first, the Kpan Logo dance and its music form is from the people of Ga and the Dangbes. We are the settlers in the greater Accra region. So where you are on Ga land. Ga land. So since you are on the Ga land, we teach you a Ga song. Okay? We will start from colonial legacy. We will learn how to recite the A, B, C, D up to P. The rest we will assume we know already. So we will all recite A up to P. Ready? Go. How come? Up to P. For now, we don't know anything like Q. Yeah, so up to P. So the song is very simple. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H. Ready? 2. Aha, good. I'm glad we're on the Ga land. We have rhythmic structures and we have to stick to it. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H. Ready, go. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H. Now listen. I, J, K, L. Hang on. M, N, O, P. I, J, K, L. M. Beautiful. So we take it from here. A, B, C, D. Ready? 2. A, G H I J K L M N O P. Good. We hit it at M N O P. We put a full stop there. Ready? Two. Nice. Good. Then we'll add Woyajo Pan Logo. Woyajo Pan Logo. Let's go. Pan Logo. Pan Logo. Woyajo means let's go dance. Pan Logo. Woyajo Pan Logo. Let's say it. Woyajo Pan Logo. Good. A B C D E F G H I J K L M N O P. Woyajo Pan Logo. That's it. Are we good to go? All right, so we'll start with a clap. So it goes like this. Clap, clap, invite someone. Clap, clap, call. Ready? We sing, go. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P. Woyajo Pan Logo. Nice. You want to try it again? I think, are we having a challenge combining the clapping and the singing? Let's embody it together. We are performers. And so we embody everything. Let's make it eclectic. So let me put his here. Ready, go. Go here for me. Nice. Are we good to go? Achade, achade. Achade, achade. Achade, achade. Inka achade negba. Kolebu yejeme. Abakpe ahambo. Ke ahebo shele. Newa achade, achade. Ewa achade, achade. Inke ho. Respond ho. Again. Ho. Respond ho. Keep clapping. A, B, C, D. Let's go. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P. Woyajo Pan Logo. Pan Logo alogo. Gologo ligi mao. Pan Logo alogo. Lologo ligi mao. Pan Logo alogo. A, B, C, D. A, B, C, D. J, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L,
M, N, O, P. Woyajo Pan Logo. Thank you so much, Dr. Harlow. I'm sure we'd rather do that than listen to a lecture. But we are academics as well, so we need some academic input. Yes. I would like to introduce the chair for this afternoon's keynote. He's one of our former students from the School of Performing Arts. We're contemporaries here, and he now teaches at Texas A&M. And he's in the person of Professor David Donko. Let's welcome him.
It's my pleasure to introduce the chair of the keynote speaker. I am the chair. To introduce the keynote speaker for this afternoon, Professor Ato Quayson. Professor Ato Quayson is the Jean G. and Maurice M. Doyle Professor of Interdisciplinary Studies at Stanford University, where he has been since 2019. Prior to that, he taught at the University of Cambridge, the University of Toronto, and at NYU, and held research fellowships at Oxford, Harvard, and Australian National University, among various others. He is an alumnus of the University of Ghana, where he took a first-class honors in English and Arabic before proceeding to the University of Cambridge to complete his doctorate. He has published 6 monographs and 9 edited collections, and is an elected Fellow of the Ghana Academy of Arts and Sciences, the Royal Society of Canada, and of the British Academy. He has also recently been elected to the American Academy of Arts and Sciences. He was president of the African Studies Association, ASA, in 2019 to 2020, and is also general editor of the Cambridge Journal of Postcolonial Literary Inquiry, and has also curated the channel Critic, Reading Writing on YouTube. His most recent book is Tragedy and Postcolonial Literature from Cambridge University Press, which was a recipient of the Warren Brooks Award for Literary Criticism in 2021. He's chair of the Department of English at Stanford University, and with a shattering round of applause, shall we welcome our speaker.
My heartfelt apologies. Even though I'm a denizen of this beautiful town, I always underestimate the traffic. That's no good excuse. Now, I will tell me how does it, I've set up, I have my computer, but I sent it beforehand. The slides are there. Okay, so I can just look on mine. Okay. So when I indicate, then you move it. Have you also set up the music? No, you don't need to sing. This is no, I don't want you guys to be exhausted. Okay. So, when I first, I've published a book. Please, next slide. Next slide. Who is controlling the slides? Okay. So I'll just say slide. I need to slide. And I published a book titled Oxford Street, Accra, which was an attempt to rewrite or retell the history of Accra from the perspective of a single street. And that is the Oxford Street of the title. But even though that is how it started, the conception, that's not how it ended. But one of the things that I came away with was that the street can be seen as an archive. So it's not just locational, that is to say, to move people from A to Z, but that it is also an archive. It's an archive of various things. And one of the things that I sought to archive was street inscriptions on the street, but more pointedly, slogans on public transport, which here we call trotro. So the trotros, So I have a chapter on the trotros in the book. However, in conceiving of the trotro inscriptions, I had a particular framework, which I'll describe the framework a little bit, which on further consideration after the book was published in 2014, after further thinking, I have altered the framework to take account of a really important dimension which I hadn't noticed in the first time. And that is the dimension of multilingualism, or the impact of multilingualism on discourse ecologies in the global south, starting with Accra specifically. The next slide. So this is this appears, there's an image of this book, this trotro. Now the trotro started off being like this. Most of them were like this. Basically in the 1930s, just after the Second World War, the British were facing stiff competition from Ford, the Ford car company in the United States. And to match the competition, they started setting up plants, Bedford plants, all over the continent. But one of them was set up in Ghana. And the Bedford plant basically produced vehicles, trucks. So they produced the engine, the front, the engine, and the chassis, but without any cover. So those came out of the plant, and people bought them and had to construct, the carriage on the chassis. And this is an example of the early construction, which was nicknamed the trotro. There's a root for the name trotro, but I don't want to go into that. However, the chassis were made of wood, the carriages were made of wood, and they were for both passenger and cargo transport. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that because it was made of wood, it had to be painted and decorated. So for a long time, the 60s and into the 70s, they were festooned with motifs from folk tales and so on. But progressively, texts began to replace the art motifs. And it is these texts that gradually coalesced into slogans, some of which, of which was of interest to me in my chapter in Oxford Street. Next slide. No, yeah. Now, Now, my framing of the trotro slogans in the book was essentially monolingual. So I would look at, and I have about over 1,000 slogans from all over the country. But my thinking, and this is really important to understand the effect of monolingual framing on how we understand this, what is inherently a discourse ecology. And there are several examples, but let me give you this particular example. When I was in my teenage years, I used to go and spend what we would call summer vacations with an uncle of mine in a town called Nsawam. Nsawam is not very far from Accra. Now, the man had a fleet of trotros similar to the ones that I showed a moment ago. And he used these for both passenger and cargo, but mainly cargo. And his slogan was, "The world is a stage." The world will be written, so the phrase "the world" will be in front, and "is a stage" will be at the back. And everyone knew him by this slogan. So when he met with his friends for drink, they'll say, "The world." Then he'll say, "It's a stage." Now, I was maybe 15 years old, and we're studying Shakespeare, and I assumed that "the world is a stage" was from As You Like It, Jacques, the 7 stages of man. And in fact, that is how it is referenced generally, that the world is a stage and we are but players, which of course appeals to many of us here. It took me a long time. In fact, it was only after I published the book and I commented on this particular slogan in the book that I realized that actually we have several sayings in Ghana that also encapsulate the principle of the world being a stage. So that even though the world's a stage in English seems to have come from Shakespeare, my uncle was not that educated. So it's very unlikely that he had any inkling of Shakespeare. I doubt it. I didn't ask him, but I doubt it. In fact, we do have a saying, it's very commonplace. It says, Obra ye aquintu, life is a journey. But because Obra ye aquintu, there are many decisions that one has to make in terms of the choice of friends that one makes on the journey. The fact that the journey may be very long, the kind of pacing that is required on the journey. In other words, Abra Yakuntu requires humility, it requires wisdom, and it requires effort. So it is more likely that he was adapting Obra Yakuntu than he was adapting the 7 stages of man's speech from Shakespeare. There's also another saying, which is actually the next one, Obrapa Ja Owurakwan, is actually the motto of my high school. The secondary school I attended, Apam Secondary School, this is our motto, Obrapa Ja Owurakwan. It is good character that illuminates the path. So there are many others in different languages. These are from Akan or Twi. And there are many such life is a journey, that motif, and which then manifest themselves on trotro slogans. So what is it that changed my framework? In essentially, what I did was to expose myself or to start rethinking a really important dimension to trotro slogan writing, which was the dimension of multilingualism. So moving from monolingualism to multilingualism. But what is the effect of multilingualism on trotro slogans? Next slide, please. Now, anthropologist Karen Barber has she's famous. Many of you will likely know of her. She works on Yoruba text. She coined the term entextualization. And entextualization is the process by which a given instance of oral discourse is transformed into a written text. In fact, Obraya Kuntu could be an example of an oral discourse which is then entextualized. Now, the processes of entextualization are variable, but inherent to them is the assumption that meaning is free to circulate across both oral and literary platforms, and that it is not owned by anybody. No one is able to say when the first person said, the first instantiation of life is a journey. But we have different variants of it. I'm using life as a journey is the simplest, but there are actually many, many, many others. Secondly, and perhaps this is even more important, is that all genres of orality tend to be inherently polysemous. And such that an oral story, for example, will be composed not just of narrative, but will also have proverbs, songs, enigmas, wise sayings, and so on. So, Sarah Jobadi, is she here? Is Sarah here? She's a collector of Ghanaian folk tales, and she will be the first to tell you that all the folk tales that she collects have different genres embedded in them. So, a story being told, and then suddenly they'll break into song, just to bring the audience in, or they'll throw out a puzzle, an enigmatic puzzle, or there will be a wise saying in the song and so on. So these genres of storytelling tend to be not just multi-generic, but polysemous. Now the polysemy in these stories are such that the different elements of the stories can be unthreaded or removed and transferred into other domains. Actually, let me give you a story. I think that's the best way to illustrate. And this was told to me when I was a kid by my father. A hunter goes into the forest to hunt, and the hunt is not going well. He has fired shot at different animals. They all escape. So he's feeling very, morose and despondent, walking back to his village. When he hears the sound of a guitar playing, it's getting to evening, he hears the sound of the guitar playing, so he follows the guitar sound, and as he turns a corner in a clearing, he sees a tortoise sitting on a rock playing a guitar. And this is the song that the tortoise is playing. Asem pe nipa, nipa no piasem, asem pe nipa, nipa no piasem, asem, rocking from side to side, like Rolling Stones. Asem pe nipa, nipa no piasem, asem pe nipa. Then suddenly the hunter comes up with an idea. He tiptoes very slowly behind the tortoise and takes his sack over the tortoise and the guitar, and then takes him to the village. He marches straight to the chief's palace and says, "Chief, I have a tortoise. I have a miraculous tortoise in this sack. Gather all the people in the town square and charge them $5 each." Americans think that we are not, globalized, but our village is also globalized, so charging $5 each. But this hunter had often come up with harebrained money-making schemes. So the chief was understandably skeptical. So he said, "Okay, I'm going to gather the people. However, if you don't get the tortoise to sing at the count of 3, you'll be beheaded." So, "Not a problem." He broke into a little bit of sweat, "But what can you do?" So, "No, it's not a problem." So they went, they set up in a great hall like this, all the villagers and the tortoise. "Sing, tortoise, sing." Tortoise was quiet. "Sing, I say, tortoise, sing." The hunter was now sweating profusely. "Sing, I say, tortoise, sing." The tortoise was quiet. They took the guy. They went, they beheaded. As soon as word got back, the executioner got back that he had been beheaded, the tortoise started singing again. Asem pe nipa, nipa no piasam. Translated, it means trouble does not look for man. It is man that looks for trouble. Now, this is a small, and this story can be elongated endlessly, which has a clear narrative. It has a lesson, a moral, but also has a song. And the song can also act as, so the refrain of the song, it's just one line, can also act as a proverb. So, however, the point about polysemousness is that each of the elements of the folk tale can be separated from the folk tale and transferred elsewhere. That's the point of the polysemy. So different elements can be separated and go elsewhere. Sorry, slide. Slide, please. I think you've jumped one. You have to go back one. Yeah. Now, the nature of the multilingual, and this was the point of insight. The nature of the multilingual environment in Accra means that the writing that we see across the urban landscape, on trotros and other surfaces, is the product of various translational transactions. This is the key point, that actually there's a series of translations taking place at all times between different languages, as well as the polysemous genres of orality. Even when the slogan on a lorry is in English, and we'll explain this a bit more, what we see as translation does not efface the local language source or its cultural modalities of orality. Translations within a multilingual context that fundamentally works to estrange the English language text. So what we are seeing may be in English, but actually it is not English as we know it. We'll see a few examples of slogans that are grammatically correct but idiomatically wrong. But they are idiomatically wrong because there is a pressure being exerted from another language. So it's almost like the linguists have a term code switching, meaning multilinguals code switch all the time. It is improper code switching. In other words, it is in the process of switching the code but stops because it has stalled at the surface of the dominant language, which is English. Slide. Now, Deleuze and Guattari, so keep polysemy, multilingualism, and the pressure of languages. But philosophers Deleuze and Guattari proposed the term deterritorialization as a way of illustrating the status of Franz Kafka's writing as a form of minor literature. But minor literature is not just the literature of minorities. Minority for them implies an attempt to write in the dominant language as a way of estranging it. That's Deleuze and Guattari, understood minor literature to be less a specific literary genre than, quote, the revolutionary conditions of literature in the midst of that which we call grand literature. The point is that these literatures deploy, it's like they embed themselves in the dominant language in order to estrange or deterritorialize the dominant language. Now, of course, Deleuze and Guattari's examples are European examples, in this case, Franz Kafka in German. But when you think about it, there's a process of deterritorialization going on the streets of various global south cities, especially formerly colonized cities. So this is what I'm interested in. How does deterritorialization look like beyond the pages of literary writing? So in postcolonial literature, we have great examples of deterritorializing writers like Salman Rushdie. If you read his Midnight's Children, it's full of Indianisms that he uses to, as it were, contort the English language. We find it in Ghanaian literature also. Someone like Kofi Awuno, and even Professor Kofi Anyudo, who was my teacher here at Legon, he's always been deterritorializing English. So postcolonial writers or global south writers, especially former colonized, also deterritorialize. But actually, when we limit ourselves to literary writers, we ignore the deterritorialization of language that is taking place on the streets. And this is the insight that got me to pay attention to the dimension that I had ignored. Slide. Slide, please. Oh, he's done it already. Actually, take you to the next one. This is not important. Next slide. So I'm going to give you examples of trotro inscriptions, and I'll gloss them minimally until we come to the examples of deterritorializing slogans. These are from the 60s, all Afros. Now, Afro is a word used for the Afro wig. So in the 60s and actually 70s, when you say the woman was wearing an Afro, obviously wearing an Afro wig, but Afro also was a word that was used to denote style, fashionable. Charlie, the guy is really Afro, that you are fashionable. And so all Afros. There was also a tradition of political slogans on vehicles. This is a reference to Patrice Lumumba, the president of the Congo, who was brutally assassinated by the Belgians and their local cohorts. He became a cause célèbre all over the continent. Another major, slogan that we saw, political slogan, was Mandela. Both Nelson Mandela and Winnie Mandela had their slogans on trotros in Accra. So there's a long tradition of political slogans. Now, there's also a long tradition of just simple pithy sayings or pieces of advice. So this one is no food for lazy man. If you are lazy, you're not going to... There are variants of this which says no wife for lazy man. I don't know what this says about our women, but we'll leave it aside. Oh, sorry. I'm moving faster than this. So a slide. Lumumba, that's what I was referring to. Lumumba is Patrice Lumumba, the president of the Congo who was brutally assassinated. Slide, please. And this is a tradition of advice. No food for lazy man. And a variant of it is no wife for lazy man. And we don't know what this says about our women, but we'll leave it aside. Slide. Sometimes some of the slogans are just poking other road users in the eye. This one says, if you think I am slow, why are you behind me? You're honking, you're blowing your horn. If you think I'm slow, why are you behind me? Just to get a laugh from people, please. Next slide. Now here is where it starts getting, it starts getting groovy. Now, cry your own cry is grammatically correct. There's nothing wrong with this. Cry your own cry. But it's actually a direct translation from a saying in Akan and Ga. Which is we don't need to. It's a straightforward, don't cry for someone else. Cry your own cry. And there are different variants of this particular sentiment. Slide. Actually, skip this one. Slide. Next slide. Next slide. Yes. Okay. Sorry. Go back one. There's also a long tradition of religious slogans. This one is a very clever, I think it's a poke in the eye of church, Christian churches, which are always taking offerings or tithes. So if you are suffering, check your offering. Which is likely something that is a direct quotation from church. Next slide. Next slide, please. Deuteronomy, no, go back. Deuteronomium 15:11. And as it happens, it's from Deuteronomy. Deuteronomy, or Deuteronomium 15:11 is about the giving of, it's about charity, that you must always pay attention to the poor. So it's about charity. So you wonder, Deuteronomium 15:11, what does it mean? And when you go to Deuteronomy 15:11, that's what it means. It's about charity. Now, before we move on to the next slide, in the 1970s, the slogans were dominated by wise sayings from traditional languages, some of them translated into English. But from roughly the mid-80s, Christian slogans began to take the place or displace the traditional slogans. Now, there's a long reason for this, but it has to do with the hardships brought on by IMF policies. Lots of people lost their jobs, the state apparatus was shrunk, and at the same time, in the 1980s, it gave rise to the big mega churches. And the mega churches were, IGCC, the Ghanaians who know this, IGCC and Action Faith Ministries. And the mega churches were prosperity churches. And the prosperity churches, they preach literally that proof of your closeness to God or your rightness in the eye of God was that you were prospering. So if you're suffering, check your offering, literally. Next slide. Now we are getting to a clever play. In trust with God. Now, in trust with God, now it's an odd way of putting the matter. However, if you thought that this was grammatically wrong, you'd be sorely mistaken. Because what this inscription is saying is that my God understands me even if you don't. That's the meaning. Because God doesn't need grammar to understand a cry for help. But not only that, in trust with God, which implies in God we trust, is a reference to the American dollar bill. You know, on top of the one side of the dollar bill, just above the image of the White House, is in God we trust. So this is also implying that we may be putting too much trust in America and the dollar and what it represents. They are more scrambled than we are, especially under Trump. In other words, the entrust with God, the grammatical blip is actually a portal highlighting different issues. One of them is that my faith in God is stronger than yours if you think that a mere grammatical, incoherence will mean that he doesn't hear me. But it's also referring to a particular social tendency to rely so much on the dollar, which, by the way, is fluctuating against the CD against the dollar is fluctuating all the time. Now, we do not know, this is important to point out. Many of these inscriptions I got from friends, and some I took photos of myself. I do not actually know whether this is what they intended. My point is that whether I knew the intention or not, this produces a particular hermeneutical invitation. In other words, it produces an invitation to interpret, irrespective of what the person may have meant in putting it out or not. And once it invites us to interpret, it opens the way for us to link the slogan to various dimensions of the discourse ecology. This is one of my favorites. Next slide. Now, if you see me tear your face, tear your face. Now, every Ghanaian here knows exactly what this is referring to. Because in the Akan language, we have a saying, it's not even a saying, just a statement. But the word te, which is, the te can mean both, depending on the tone, can mean both to tear, as in to tear a piece of paper, or to open, as in to smile. So this really means if you see me, smile. But what appears, so it is grammatically correct, but idiomatically wrong. But its idiomatic falseness is a clue to the fact that the Akan language statement is actually pressing, this is a good example of the Akan language statement pressing upon the surface of the English language slogan to deterritorialize it. So what we're actually seeing is a struggle. So the idiomatic infelicity is the signal of struggle. It's a signal of a series of translational struggles within the multilingual domain. This is the key point that I had missed in my original disquisition on the slogans. So whenever you see what appears on the surface to be an error, it is not an error, it's a signal. It's a signal of a struggle taking place in the multilingual domain. There's another dimension to this statement. If you see me tear your face. Typically, it is a statement issued by a more powerful person to a less powerful person. So your landlord can say, if you see me, smile. Or a more powerful man can tell, women get this all the time, smile, laugh when you see me. And so it is also indicating the fact that there are certain social arrangements which are inherently unfair and only benefit the more powerful. So on the surface of this slogan, if you see me, tear your face, is the translational struggle between English and Akan, but it's also a statement about different forms of social unease or social awkwardness. Because a less powerful person never says to a more powerful person, hey, if you see me, smile. Wafa uhumi atiwenim. Wafa means uncle. You don't go and tell your wafa uhumi atiwenim. It's not done. Next slide. Now, it's important also to note that what I originally described as a discourse ecology pertained predominantly to inscriptions on lorries and vehicles and certain surfaces. But actually, the idea of slogans also extends to canoe. This is a fishing canoe. Now, the name you see on it, Michel Essien, is a reference to a famous football player. Americans miscall it soccer. A football player who played for Chelsea for many years. But his name was not Michel. It was Michael. His name was Michael Essien, not Michel Essien. So you wonder whether the mistake. So for me, as soon as I see what appears to be an error, I'm immediately alert to what might be happening. The man's name was always in the news, so it's unthinkable that they didn't know how to spell his name. But why did they say Michel instead of Michael? It is also to show that if you thought it was Michael Essien, and he might get pissed off that they're taking his name in vain, it is not Michael I wrote, it's Michel. It's to evade the censor. But it's also a kind of a humorous take on the difference between formality and informality. The guy is called Michael Essien, but I have written Michel Essien, and it makes you think of Michael Essien immediately, but I did not write Michael. The other thing about this particular boat is that there was a period when the phone company MTN, which is South African, decided to do a major advertising campaign in which they offered anyone that cared to stand still to be painted in the colors of the corporation. So blue and yellow were the MTN colors. And lots of stores, and in this case the boat, they offer themselves to be painted in the colors. So actually, this is also a piece of very clever advertising. The writing at the end of the boat, Nyungo Ife, it means it's gone. It's God has done it, or God has accomplished it. So there are lots of things happening. The point of the matter is that these slogans, wise sayings, sentiments, spread across a whole range of what we would call platforms. But they share similar features, which is that the apparent flaw or mistake is always to be taken not as to be corrected. That's not the point. The point of what appears to be a flaw, a mistake, is not that it is inviting correction, but it's inviting interpretation. So that the mistake is actually a portal into various things. Now, before I go to what will become my final slide, I want to play a song which will illustrate the brushing together of different languages and discourses within the multilingual context. Please, who is in charge of the technology? Who's in charge of the technology now? Sorry? It's not the site, it's on YouTube. They should just pull it up on YouTube. King Promise, oh yeah. I sent I sent it earlier. YouTube, go to YouTube and pull up King Promise. Where is it? Where are they? He's doing it. Go to YouTube and pull King Promise all year. Where's the guy? Awo? He's in the corner. Control room guy. Charlie, wait till the pen. Is it? nothing to do with me. He's singing in 3 different languages. So he's singing in Pidgin English, he's singing in Twi, and he's singing in Ga. And what he's actually doing is that he's playing different love languages against one another. So when he says, Ohima Brahmin Cheng, Ohima means my queen or my princess. Ohima, come close to me. Come close to me. And then he'll say something else in Pidgin. And then he'll also say something else in Ga, which is Nkebobaya, Boji morning, Nkebobaya. Nkebobaya means it is you I want to go on life's journey with, and so on. What he's actually doing is that he's playing the discourses of romantic love, exclusiveness. Romantic love has jealousy, exclusiveness, and so on. But the different languages have different loads about love. So Akan love, when he says, my queen, come close to me, it has a different value from saying it, say, in English. Now, what he then does is that he produces an interplay of different romantic discourses of romantic love among 3 languages. And of course, the song also appeals to speakers of all 3 languages. But there's another thing that this song and the many other Afrobeat songs are doing, is that by using Pidgin English, Pidgin is a demotic form of the English language, which, surprise, surprise, was seeded in West Africa by the Portuguese. The Portuguese made landfall in the 1414, I think, in Cape Verde, the first time. But then they established different merchant establishments all across, and they used a variant of Portuguese Pidgin as a trade language. It is the Portuguese Pidgin which, after several centuries, becomes converted into what we know as Pidgin English. So, for example, if I go to Nigeria and they speak Pidgin English, I completely understand. So I understand everything that when I meet my Nigerian friends, we typically start off with Pidgin before we drift off into whatever common languages that we share. What this has actually allowed them to do is that because Pidgin is minimally understandable to any English language speaker. What this has allowed them to do is that it has allowed them to actually globalize their songs. So Burna Boy or Rema, Baby Calm Down, is on top of the Billboard charts in the United States, because we all know what calm down is. But in fact, in the song itself, he's deploying a lot of Pidgin phrases. Now, this globalization, which is in a way an elongation of the reach of what is really what I mentioned earlier, the struggles in the multilingual domain, is also an extension of what we are seeing on the surface of trotro slogans. So the way I conceived of discourse ecology before in Oxford Street was not capacious enough to accommodate the different platforms in which these translational transactions were taking place, extending into globalization and so on. The final slide, and then I promise to stop. Last slide. I've been thinking that, maybe what I've just described, the fact that what appears to be an error is actually a portal, it's a signal for us, it's an invitation to interpret. Maybe in the domain of orality, or in the oscillation between orality and writing, we are seeing something similar to what has been described for hypertext, the hypertextual world. Because what is hypertext? Hypertext, as Robert Carver describes, is polyvocal, it's interactive, it establishes a different relationship between author and, in his case, reader. But the most important thing is that when we encounter a hypertextual link, we know for sure that it is going to to usher it into a forest of signifiers. So you press the hypertextual link, the hot link, you press it and you are ready to be ushered into what is a series of thresholds. Because another link will come up and you press it. The best way to see this in operation is in the configuration of platforms like Instagram and Facebook. So typically there will be cool text, but there will also be links, which one you press. But when we are confronted by these hypertextual links, we approach them with the expectation and preparedness that they are going to usher it into other domains. In fact, my closing statement is that, in fact, the domain of orality, properly understood, is already hypertextual or hyper-oral. We need a word different than textual, because these are not textual, or they are hyper-intextualized. But we, because of our education in English, we see them as inert. We see this, and that's why I conceive of the slogans in Oxford Street as essentially monolingual. So they were not exactly inert, but they were not as vital and as active as when I replaced them, I relocated them in a multilingual context. The point is that hypertextuality may already be present in orality, but we have to look anew at what lies right before us. Thank you very much. I'm all yours. Mm-hmm. Oh, yes, David.
Join me once again in thanking Prof for this insightful and engaging presentation. I don't know how much wiggle room we have, if we have any at all, Professor Awo, but maybe
3 questions.
Yes, just if we can make them quick and short, that will be great. Yes, please.
We don't have hypertextual questions.
No hypertextual questions. All right. So I don't know if there are microphones on the ground, but if we can get going. Oh, okay. Good. There we go. So, Prof, why don't you get the mic? There's a hand over there.
Thank you very much for that wonderful talk and that insight into language and the elasticity of language. And my question is addressing exactly this notion of the languages that seem maybe from a European perspective be combined, that we have one language and the other language is combined like a puzzle system. But in fact, we have like a language as a body, like as a performative action. And my question would be in how far you would also maybe connect what you just addressed in terms of hypertextuality, etc., towards the bodily action that comes with the oral communication. Because since especially African languages and indigenous languages have no written text as a pre-start, but have a different way of, or not a different way, but have a flexibility and elasticity, which is much more connected to body language as well. I would be interested in how far you would have maybe some suggestions for performance studies to not take away a step from trying to describe by written text the body the movement actions, but maybe take a different path?
Well, actually, there's someone, Kofi Ajikum, he's at the University of Ghana, has written a book on the bodily basis of Ghanaian language, but I think specifically he was focusing on Akan, and how different phrases actually are linked to different body parts. Like, for example, mi jimini in Akan, I mean, the straight translation is I'm happy. But actually, it refers to feeding your eyes. No, me Jiminy, I'm putting something in my eyes. I'm taking in the world. And he does so there's actually a physical, material basis to many of the metaphors that are generated in the local languages, but they become inert. They become inert, so people don't actually dwell upon the relationship to the body. Another way of answering your question is whether there is a dramatic function to the language. That is to say, when you speak one language, whether you feel more dramatic in your body. I can only answer this anecdotally. I speak several languages, but I crack the best jokes in one of them, especially the best sexually inappropriate jokes. Yeah, I need to speak in that particular language. If I say it in English, it will not come properly. And my gesticulations also change. I haven't taken my time to understand why is it that I can only tell sexually inappropriate jokes in that particular language. I promise not to regale you with any, for now. But there may be something to do with the link between languages and laughter, for example. There's something else I'm working on, and it's on why Ghanaians laugh so much for no accountable reason. I have a whole theory that they laugh all the time for no account. And it's different from the laugh in order not to cry syndrome. Is the fact that in radio adverts or television adverts, almost all adverts end with some form of laughter. It can be children's diapers. They'll put the baby laughing in it. What in America call Advil. Here they call paracetamol. There'll be laughter in it. And I was wondering, why is there there's so much laughter on Ghanaian radio, but none on the BBC? Oh no, seriously. So I was switching, when I'm driving, I was switching between the BBC and local radio. And local radio, they were laughing all the time. But the BBC, they never laugh. So that was my question. And I have a whole theory about the place of laughter in Ghanaian languages and culture. So that may take me into the bodily features, yes.
Hi.
One more, okay. One more. Last question.
I'm here. My name is Kwame Boafo. I think in your book, you talked about the streets as a demarcated spatial theater. And so I'll be interested, at least as theater people gathered here, if you could more or less sort of expand on it and how that ties into the Trotro slogans. Yeah.
Well, not directly, but the streets are definitely a space of theater. There's no doubt about it. I call it events. So the streets are full of events. And the eventfulness comes from the fact that there are always disagreements about street use. And this is partly because the sidewalks, and I was thinking at the time specifically of Oxford Street, but there are other places in Accra. The sidewalks have been typically colonized by shopping. So there are lots of goods on the sidewalks. So pedestrians are forced to go off the sidewalks and onto the roadway. But this going off onto the roadway generates disagreements about the right uses of the road as opposed to the sidewalk. But the way the disagreements follow certain performative scripts. So suddenly you see there will be a breakout in an argument and they'll be arguing furiously. But actually, and of course, as they are starting to argue and disagree, there will be a small group of people coming to watch, spectators. But the point of the quarrel is not who is right or who is wrong, But who can produce the smartest mode of insult to embarrass the other person? So your victory is not because your argument is better, but you deploy the language better. You know, and I give some examples in the book. No, yeah. I give some examples in the book of, there's one I just took. So there's a taxi driver rushing toward a zebra crossing, and the people crossing have right of way, so they've stepped on it, and he almost runs into them, and they insult him. Unya, 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 unya is your mother, but is your mother referencing a particular anatomical feature of mothers? So in Accra, you don't go around doing this. If you do this, you get into big trouble because it's referencing somebody's mother's anatomy. So the guys start insulting. They start insulting unya, 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 and he insults them back and says, "Look at nasty people, like cats that have fallen into a fire." I say injamwa atojim. Now, of course, suddenly the pedestrians who were originally pissed off at him start laughing. That's the point. The point is that he's victorious, or he has defeated them momentarily, rhetorically, because of the rhetoric. Because the idea of a cat falling into fire takes us all to traditional coal fire kitchens. Because we have coal fire, not the electric stoves and so on. And for a cat to fall into a coal fire was to disrupt the entire kitchen. There will be all kinds of banging and things falling, likely the loss of food. So he's telling them that they're out of place. They don't even know the rules of zebra, even though he's completely wrong. They don't know that. You think that the way you cross zebra crossings work in New York is the way they work in Accra. Try again. Good to see you. Thank you, David. Thank you.
I know those presenting in the general panels are anxious. We just have coffee now, so we are just half an hour later. So we just wriggle half an hour late. So please go now for coffee, and then go for your general panels, please. Thank you.